Welcome to a very early morning of Clutch and Go with the Mazda CX-5 Akira. Now, as we can see, Mazda's Kodo design shines brightly through the design language of the CX-5, and as with all the other models, it does look good, especially the nose, in my opinion. And these wheels, those just look great. We also see the same GT-like lines running from the nose of the car right to the back, which makes it look very sporty and purposefully designed. But I must admit, the back is slightly bubbly and not entirely to my fancy. As with all the other models, we have keyless entry, which is always nice. And if we look at the cabin, let me just back up for you a bit. If you look at the cabin, it all seems very familiar. The center console, air conditioning unit, infotainment system controls, everything looks very similar to that of the Mazda 3 that we had, with the exception of the parking brake, which is now an electronic one, which I have mixed feelings about, and the steering wheel, which is much more similar to that of the Mazda 2, except this one actually has cruise control, so we have the buttons for that. The instrument binnacle is also different. As you see, we actually have an analog speedometer, rev gauge on the left, and on the right hand side we have a little digital screen giving us all types of information that is very useful. Now, obviously, this being an SUV, it is very spacious on the inside. It is slightly wider than the Mazda 3, but besides for that, it is more or less the same size inside as we saw in the Mazda 3. Ample space at the back, as I will demonstrate to you. As you can see, my being quite tall, I have no issues fitting in at the back. And another little cool feature is, if we look at the middle seat, it flips down to an armrest / cup holders, which is quite nice. Then, the big difference would be the boot. Now, this being an SUV, the boot is obviously quite large. I would say the boot in the CX-5 is exceptionally big. I could basically park half of my Suzuki Swift in there, and you can obviously flip down the seats to create more space if necessary, just like in most modern vehicles. But now, as ever, we need to find out whether the Mazda CX-5 is actually nice to drive on a daily basis. And regarding myself as somewhat of a driver, that's going to be a big challenge, seeing as I hate the way most SUVs drive. So the model I'm in is the Mazda CX-5 Akira, which is the top of the range 2.2 litre turbo diesel model with all-wheel drive. Now, the turbo diesel engine produces around 129 kilowatts of power and 420 newton meters of torque, all very pleasantly being conveyed through a 6-speed automatic gearbox, the same that we've found in the Mazda 3. Now, all of this makes for a very comfortable and easy drive, especially with the all-wheel drive system. It works really properly well and really does a lot to the handling of this car. But I'll get to the positives of the actual driving of the car later. For now, I first want to rant about SUVs. If you've watched my previous videos, you might have noticed that I might have a slight tendency to not like SUVs at all. Mainly because I don't see the point of them. If you look at the CX-5, for example, it is more or less exactly the same as the Mazda 3. interior wise, it's the same size as a Mazda 3, just slightly wider. The only difference is you're higher off the ground and you have a bigger boot. Now, a lot of people justify buying SUVs by saying that they have families and they've got a lot to transport when they go anywhere and whatever. But I'm sorry, I've commuted with quite a few cars in my lifetime, and never have I ever had the desire to have an SUV at my disposal to do what needs to be done. Now, unless you plan on actually piling 5 children into the boot of an SUV, this one specifically having quite a large boot, I really don't see the point. I mean, that's not an excuse. That's why we have trailers and things like that. A lot of people feel safer being high off the ground. I guess I understand that, but I don't like it. But I am one of those people who like to consider myself to be a driver, which means I like to be as low down in a car as possible, as close to the road as possible, because I want to experience driving. And also because I like to entertain my inner 9-year-old by imagining that I'm in a go-kart. But that's not important. That's just me. So, is it really that important to be in an SUV? Can you really justify paying 100,000 Rand more for this CX-5 than you would for the similar top of the range Mazda 3, just for a bit more boot space and an elevated ride height? I really don't think so. You can spend that 100,000 Rand doing other things. And on top of all of this, your fuel consumption in SUV is not great. I mean, the fuel consumption in this specific model is fantastic as far as SUVs go. You get about 7.9 liters per 100 kilometers as an average fuel consumption, but it really doesn't feel like that. You've got a large petrol tank, and even when driving very courteously, I just see the needle dropping. I've barely gone anywhere and I've already emptied half a tank. And I mean, that's just not a good trade-off for me. I don't like that. But enough about why I despise SUVs. Let's talk about what actually makes the CX-5 tick when you drive it. So driving the Mazda CX-5 is a very pleasant experience, except for feeling like you are driving a boat due to the size, but the drivetrain works very, very well. Everything is smooth and it's just a pleasure on the road. The four-wheel drive system has a lot to do with that, especially when you start driving more exuberantly. Then you really feel the four-wheel drive system working and just giving you endless grip, which is fantastic considering you are driving a vehicle that is vast. Now, the steering wheel is not too much to my fancy. It's the same steering wheel that you find on the Mazda 2, and to me it just feels slightly too small for a car this size. But this is what most SUVs are like. They are actually just cars more than all-round utility vehicles, seeing as they can't really go off-road. But if you were to go off-road with the CX-5, at least you would have that all-wheel drive system to help you out there. Now, the handling in the CX-5 is what really makes this a pleasure to drive. And I've said the same thing about the CX-3 and the Mazda 3, and that's because I really, really mean it. But it's particularly astonishing in the CX-5, seeing as you are lugging around something that is vast. Despite that though, the handling is very similar to the handling of the Mazda 3. Obviously you can feel the increased weight that you are lugging around corners, but no matter what you do, the CX-5 remains flat through corners, which I find amazing because I've never experienced that in an SUV. That's one of the reasons why I despise SUVs, because they handle like boats as well. But the CX-5 handles like a sporty hatchback, which is just heavy. And that is just amazing. So on top of all of that, this is just a generally comfortable car to drive, with all the utilities that you might actually need inside the car, and everything just works well. So in terms of driving, that's about it. It's an SUV that you can actually have fun with around corners, thanks to the brilliant handling and the all-wheel drive system working very well together to give you that almost driver car feel. And that is quite significant, seeing as we are seeing the market being flooded with these new driver-orientated SUVs, or drivers SUVs, if you will. Now, they cost about twice the amount of the CX-5 Akira, which is a ridiculous amount of money for something that is firstly an SUV, which means it is, in my mind, irrelevant, and secondly, doesn't actually make you feel like you are in something that can be regarded as a driver's car due to the ride height and the size and the weight and all of that. But at the price of a budget SUV, you do get an SUV that actually makes you feel like you are in a driver's car to a certain extent, which I think is quite fantastic. I'm now going to attempt a very quick 0 to 100 run. As you can see, the CX-5 is no slouch, and the interesting thing about this turbo diesel engine, unlike the turbo diesel engine of the Mazda 2, is that there's no turbo lag, especially not when you put your foot down. It does feel like if you gently prod the throttle, as if there is some lag, but I think that's more for economical purposes than it is actual turbo lag, which is just fantastic for a turbo diesel engine at least. And yeah, the four-wheel drive really helps making this Akira stick to the ground and really accelerate out of just about anything, out of corners, accelerate from 0 to 100, and all in all, in terms of performance, you are really not downgrading if you have to compare this to a more expensive, more performance-orientated SUV, because you have the performance from the engine, you have the handling, which is fantastic, and these two make for an oddly engaging drive, considering that this is an SUV. Now, this being said, I still don't like SUVs. The Mazda CX-5 would not be my first choice. I would still much rather go for something like a Mazda 3. But if you are in a position where you, for some weird, diluted reason, really need an SUV, the Mazda CX-5 might just be the right way to go for you. In summary, the Mazda CX-5 is still an SUV, but there is quite a lot to love. It is a very comfortable drive. It can provide you with some fun if you desire, and all in all, at its price range, considering what you get for the money with the all-wheel drive system in the Akira and the fantastic handling and all the safety features and comfort that you might want in an SUV, the Mazda CX-3 has shaped up to be something that actually impressed me as an SUV, which I didn't think I would say anytime soon. But all in all, the Mazda CX-5, I don't want to say this, sort of makes me hate SUVs slightly less, or at least this model in particular. I don't know, I have weird feelings at the moment, but I think that might be a compliment to Mazda. My conflicting feelings. So there you go, Mazda, enjoy that. So that's it from Clutch and Go and the Mazda CX-5. Stick around, we'll have some more content coming your way. And thank you very much for the support. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the website www.clutchandgo.co.za to view all the content as it's released.